There is a place in the Western Atlantic where the water changes color without warning, where the seafloor drops from the height of a tabletop to a depth greater than any mountain on Earth stands tall. A place where 5 Navy bombers vanished on a clear December afternoon, where a 600-foot warship carrying 300 souls sent one final message: weather fair, all well, and was never heard from again. Where a 23-foot cabin cruiser radioed the Coast Guard from less than a mile offshore, and by the time help arrived, 19 minutes later, there was nothing. No boat, no debris, no oil slick, nothing at all. What happened to them? Where did they go? And what is it about this particular stretch of ocean that swallows the things we send across it? The name is known to nearly everyone on Earth. It has appeared in more than 4,000 books, spawned dozens of films, and generated more theories than perhaps any other place in the modern world. Aliens, time warps, Atlantis, magnetic anomalies, government conspiracies, methane eruptions from the deep. But what if the strangest thing about the Bermuda Triangle is that almost no one has ever actually seen it? Not the cable news version, not the paperback myth, but the place itself. The water, the rock, the life, the light, the darkness beneath the surface. What if the most feared stretch of ocean on the planet is also genuinely one of the least understood? The Triangle has no official borders. No government recognizes it. No maritime authority marks it on any chart. But by loose convention, its 3 vertices rest at Miami, Bermuda, and San Juan, Puerto Rico, forming a region of roughly 500,000 square miles of open Atlantic. To cross it from corner to corner is to travel more than 1,000 miles. The distance from Miami to Bermuda alone stretches further than the length of California. And yet this is no uniform body of water. The Triangle contains some of the most extreme depth contrasts anywhere in the world ocean. The Great Bahama Bank, a vast underwater plateau east of Florida, sits beneath barely 5 to 7 meters of crystalline sea. A person could stand on its sandy bottom and still see the sky. It is so shallow that from space it glows turquoise against the surrounding Atlantic blue. But step off that bank to the east, and the seafloor vanishes. The tongue of the ocean, a submarine canyon carved into the Bahamas platform, plunges more than 2,000 meters straight down. One of the sheerest underwater drop-offs on the planet. Shallow enough to wade, and deep enough to swallow a skyscraper, separated by less than a mile. The United States Navy uses the tongue of the ocean as a deep-water testing facility. Its combination of sheltered access and extreme depth, within easy reach of shore, makes it one of the few places on Earth where submarines can be tested at operational depths without venturing into open ocean. The depth is so abrupt that a vessel can transit from water a diver could stand in to water that would crush an unprotected hull in a matter of minutes. Further east, beyond the shallow banks and the island chains, the Atlantic floor descends into one of the most profound features on Earth, the Puerto Rico Trench. At its deepest point, a place called the Milwaukee Deep, the seafloor lies 8,376 meters below the surface, 27,480 feet, the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean, deeper than any point in the Indian Ocean, deeper than all but a handful of trenches in the Pacific. If Mount Everest were placed at the bottom of the Milwaukee Deep, its summit would still rest beneath more than 1,000 meters of water. Beneath the open Atlantic, running northeast from the triangle toward the mid-ocean ridge, lies a chain of more than 30 extinct volcanoes, the New England Seamount Chain. Their peaks rise 4,000 meters or more from the abyssal plain, yet none breaks the surface. They are mountains in every sense, vast, steep, ancient, invisible to anyone sailing above them. Some are older than the Appalachians. They formed as the tectonic plate drifted over a volcanic hotspot, one by one, like pearls strung across the deep. Their slopes harbor cold water corals, deep-sea sponge gardens, and species found nowhere else. And their existence means that the seafloor beneath the triangle is not flat, not featureless, not empty. It is a landscape, as varied and as rugged as anything above the waterline. And running through the heart of the triangle, like a river with no banks, flows the most powerful ocean current in the Atlantic, the Gulf Stream. Moving at speeds up to 5.5 miles per hour, faster than most people walk, the Gulf Stream transports 30 million cubic meters of water every second through the narrow strait between Florida and the Bahamas. Its surface temperature hovers near 84 degrees Fahrenheit, a warm conveyor belt cutting through cooler surrounding waters. It is one of the most studied currents on Earth, and one of the most consequential, because anything that falls into the Gulf Stream, a life jacket, a fuel tank, a piece of wing, is carried northward at a pace that can move debris 60 miles in a single day. Within hours, the evidence of a disaster can scatter across hundreds of square miles of open ocean, and within days, it can vanish entirely. This is the Bermuda Triangle. To understand what happens here, one must first understand what was here long before the name existed, long before the myth, long before the first newspaper headline or the first paperback with a glowing green cover. The story begins not with disappearance, but with arrival. On the evening of September 15, 1492, a Genoese navigator, sailing under the flag of Castile, recorded something unusual in his log. A great branch of fire, he wrote, fell from the sky into the sea. A meteor, though he had no word for it, streaking across the western Atlantic. 2 days later, on September 17th, his compass began to behave strangely. The needle drifted, not by a small amount, but by more than 11 degrees, deviating from true north in a way no European mariner had ever documented. Christopher Columbus had just made the first recorded observation of magnetic declination in the open Atlantic. He did not understand what caused it. His crew grew frightened. Some believed the laws of nature themselves were changing as they sailed further from the known world. And then, On the night of October 11th, Columbus recorded a light, a small glow on the horizon, rising and falling like a little wax candle, lifting up and down. He could not explain it. His men saw it too. Modern researchers have offered explanations. Bioluminescent marine worms, Bermuda fireworms, which rise to the surface in glowing clouds 56 hours after each full moon. Or the distant fires of the Taino people, burning on the shores of an island not yet in view. Columbus never solved the mystery. He sailed on, and the waters he crossed would not yield their secrets for another 5 centuries. East of the Triangle's shipping lanes, cradled between 4 rotating ocean currents, lies a body of water unlike any other on Earth, the Sargasso Sea. It is the only sea in the world with no coastline. No land borders it. No continent touches it. It is defined entirely by the currents that encircle it. The Gulf Stream to the west, the North Atlantic Current to the north, the Canary Current to the east, and the North Atlantic Equatorial Current to the south. A sea within a sea, still and warm and impossibly clear. Its waters stretch across more than 3.5 million square kilometers. Visibility beneath the surface can reach 200 feet, deeper than in almost any other open ocean. And floating on that surface, in tangled mats that can stretch for miles, drifts the seaweed that gives the Sargasso its name. Sargassum, golden brown, buoyant, held aloft by tiny gas-filled bladders that glisten in the sun. There are 2 species here that exist nowhere else in quite this way: Sargassum natans and Sargassum fluitans. They are holopelagic, meaning they spend their entire lives adrift. They never touch the seafloor, they never root in soil. They are born on the surface, they grow on the surface, and they die on the surface. A forest with no ground beneath it. The Sargasso has frightened sailors for centuries. Columbus's men feared the weed would trap their ships. Later mariners told of vessels becalmed for weeks in windless stretches, their hulls slowly encrusted with barnacles, their supplies dwindling. But the Sargasso is not a graveyard. It is a nursery. More than 145 invertebrate species live among its floating mats. 127 species of fish shelter in its tangles. 10 species are found nowhere else on Earth, endemic to a habitat that has no fixed address. Among them is the Sargassum frogfish, Histrio histrio, a creature the size of a human fist, mottled to match the weed exactly, with prehensile fins that grip the floating fronds like fingers. It is an ambush predator so well camouflaged that its prey does not see it until the strike, which lasts 6 milliseconds. One of the fastest feeding responses in the animal kingdom. And it is a cannibal. A voracious one. Given the chance, it will eat its own kind without hesitation. But the Sargasso Sea guards a deeper secret still. It is the only known spawning ground for both the European eel and the American eel, 2 species whose life cycles remained one of the great mysteries of biology for more than 2,000 years. Aristotle believed eels arose spontaneously from mud. For centuries, no one could explain where they came from because no one had ever found an eel with eggs. The answer lay here, in the deep, warm waters of the Sargasso. European eels travel between 5,000 and 10,000 kilometers from the rivers of Europe to spawn in these waters. Their larvae, Transparent, leaf-shaped creatures called leptocephali then drift on ocean currents for 3 years or more before reaching the coasts of Europe, where they transform into glass eels, then elvers, then the dark, serpentine adults that inhabit freshwater streams and lakes. A single generation's journey spans an entire ocean, and the cycle has repeated for millions of years. No one has ever witnessed an eel spawn in the Sargasso. No one has ever found a fertilized eel egg in the wild. The final act of the species' reproductive life, the moment that sustains the entire population, remains hidden from science. We know where they go, we know what they become, but the act itself has never been observed. It is one of the oldest unsolved questions in marine biology, and it belongs not to the Bermuda Triangle myth, but to the Sargasso Sea itself, a genuine mystery requiring no embellishment. Yet today, European eel populations have declined by more than 95% since the 1980s. The cause remains debated: climate change, habitat loss, barriers to migration, parasites. But the Sargasso remains their only cradle. Without it, the species has no future. It was into these waters, this convergence of ancient currents and improbable life, that the modern myth of the Bermuda Triangle was born. Not from the sea itself, but from the stories people told about it. And the most famous of those stories begins on a Tuesday afternoon in December 1945. Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station, December 5th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers lifted off the runway for a routine training exercise designated Flight 19. 14 men in total. Their instructor, Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, was an experienced combat pilot with more than 2,500 hours of flight time. The mission was simple: fly east over the Bahamas, practice bombing runs on hens and chickens shoals, turn north, then west, then home. A triangular route. 2 hours, start to finish. The weather was fair, the seas were moderate, the planes were fueled for more than enough range. At approximately 3:40 in the afternoon, something went wrong. Taylor radioed the tower. Both of his compasses had failed. He believed he was somewhere over the Florida Keys, south of the base, when in fact, he was over the Bahamas, east of it. His navigation was inverted. Every correction he made took the flight further from land, not closer. The transmissions grew fragmented. Other pilots in the flight could be heard disagreeing with Taylor's headings. One suggested turning west. Taylor overruled him. By 4 o'clock, winds at altitude had climbed to 75 miles per hour. The sun was setting. Fuel was running low. The last confirmed transmission came at approximately 6:20 in the evening. Taylor's voice fading in and out of static. His position, estimated later by triangulation, 29 degrees north, 79 degrees west. Open ocean, more than 200 miles from land. No confirmed wreckage from Flight 19 has ever been found. The Navy launched a search that would eventually cover 300,000 square miles of ocean and coastline. Hundreds of aircraft and dozens of surface vessels crisscrossed the waters east of Florida for days. It was one of the largest air-sea rescue operations in peacetime history. Among the search aircraft was a PBM-5 Mariner flying boat carrying 13 crew members. It departed at 7:27 that evening. 20 minutes later, it too vanished. At 9:45, the crew of the SS Gaines Mills reported seeing an explosion in the sky, a bright flash, a column of flame falling into the sea. The Mariner carried over 2,000 gallons of aviation fuel. Its crew called it the flying gas tank. 14 men from Flight 19, 13 from the Mariner. 27 souls in a single evening. The Navy's official conclusion, after months of investigation, used a phrase almost without precedent. Cause unknown. Flight 19 became the foundation stone of the Bermuda Triangle legend. But it was not the first disappearance, and it was far from the last. 27 years earlier, in March of 1918, a ship 3 times the length of Flight 19's bombers had vanished in the same waters. And its loss remains, to this day, the single greatest non-combat disappearance in the history of the United States Navy. The USS Cyclops was a 540-foot Navy collier, a coal and ore carrier, displacing more than 19,000 tons. In early March of 1918, she departed Barbados bound for Baltimore, carrying between 306 and 309 men and officers. Her cargo hold was loaded with 11,000 long tons of manganese ore. Her rated capacity was 8,100 tons. She was overloaded by nearly 3,000 tons. One of her engines had already broken down. A cylinder had cracked, and the Cyclops was making the crossing on a single engine, slower, less maneuverable, riding dangerously low in heavy seas. Her last message, received by radio, read simply, "Weather fair, all well." She never arrived in Baltimore. No wreckage was ever found. No distress signal was ever received. 300 men gone. And in the years that followed, 2 of the Cyclops' sister ships, the USS Proteus and the USS Nereus, also vanished in the Atlantic while carrying heavy loads of metallic ore. Neither was ever found. On the 30th of January 1948, a British South American Airways aircraft, designated Star Tiger, departed the Azores for Bermuda. It was an Avro Tudor Mark IV, a pressurized airliner, one of the most advanced of its era. 31 people were aboard. Among them was Air Marshal Sir Arthur Conyngham, a decorated war hero, one of the most senior military officers in Britain. The flight encountered strong headwinds. To conserve fuel, the crew descended to just 2,000 feet above the ocean's surface, dangerously low for a transatlantic crossing, but necessary to find calmer air. At 3:15 in the morning, the radio operator contacted Bermuda to confirm position and request a bearing. The reply was sent. Star Tiger never acknowledged it. By 3:50, there was silence. Repeated calls went unanswered. A massive search found nothing. No wreckage, no oil, no life rafts. The British Court of Investigation issued a final report that would echo through aviation history. The fate of Star Tiger, it concluded, must forever remain an unsolved mystery. Less than a year later, on January 17, 1949, another Avro Tudor Mark IV, Star Ariel, departed Bermuda for Jamaica, carrying 20 passengers and crew. The weather was clear. The pilot radioed his position 1 hour after takeoff. Nothing further was ever heard. After the loss of Star Ariel, all Tudor IV aircraft were permanently grounded. 2 planes of the same type, both lost in the same region, both without explanation, both without a single piece of recovered debris. In February of 1963, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a converted T2 tanker, departed Beaumont, Texas, carrying 39 crew members and 15,260 long tons of molten sulfur. The sulfur was held in heated tanks at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. The ship had a history of sulfur leaks. Fires had burned aboard almost continuously on previous voyages. Corrosion riddled the hull. The United States Coast Guard would later describe the vessel in blunt terms: unseaworthy, and should never have gone to sea. She vanished in the Straits of Florida. The search recovered only fragments: 8 life jackets, 2 of them bearing shark bite marks, 5 life rings, and 2 name boards adrift in the current. Of the 39 men aboard, not a single body was found. The Gulf Stream had already begun its work. Within hours of whatever happened, the evidence was scattering northward, dissolving into the same waters that carried the debris of every vessel lost before her. But perhaps no disappearance in the Triangle's history is stranger than that of the Carroll A. Deering. On the 31st of January 1921, a 5-masted commercial schooner was found hard aground on Diamond Shoals, off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Her sails were still set, her anchors were missing, her lifeboats were gone. When rescuers boarded her, they found the galleys still warm. Coffee sat on the stove, soup simmered in a pot. Spare ribs were laid out half-prepared, as though the cook had stepped away and simply never returned. The ship's wheel was shattered. All navigation equipment, charts, logbooks, compasses, the ship's clock, had been removed. Personal belongings were missing. The only living things aboard were 3 half-starved cats. No crew member was ever found. No explanation was ever confirmed. The investigation reached the highest levels of the American government. Herbert Hoover personally reviewed the case. Before it was closed in 1922 without resolution. 11 men. A fully provisioned ship, food still cooking on the stove, and no one aboard. On the evening of December 22nd, 1967, a man named Dan Burak took his 23-foot cabin cruiser, a vessel its manufacturer described as practically unsinkable, out into the calm waters off Miami Beach to view the Christmas lights along the shore. At 9 o'clock that night, Burak radioed the Coast Guard from a position near buoy number 7, less than 1 mile from the harbor entrance. He reported a minor issue. He was calm. He asked for a tow. The Coast Guard cutter arrived 19 minutes later. There was nothing there. No boat, no debris, no flare, no disturbance in the water. Buoy number 7 stood alone in the darkness. A search was launched that would eventually cover 24,500 square miles. Aircraft swept the coastline. Boats crisscrossed the shallows. Divers checked the seafloor beneath the buoy. Nothing was ever found. The boat was called Witchcraft, and it had vanished within sight of the city lights. These are the stories that built the legend. Not all at once, but piece by piece, over decades, assembled by journalists and authors who recognize something powerful, that the human mind is drawn to patterns, especially patterns of absence. The first person to connect the dots was a reporter named Edward Van Winkle Jones. On September 16, 1950, he published an article in the Miami Herald noting an unusual concentration of missing ships and aircraft in the waters between Florida and the Caribbean. 2 years later, in the October 1952 issue of Fate magazine, a writer named George X. Sand became the first to describe the area as a roughly triangular zone. He drew no formal boundaries. He offered no theory. He simply noted the shape. The name came later. In February of 1964, a writer named Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine titled "The Deadly Bermuda Triangle." It was the first time those three words appeared together in print, but the myth did not truly explode until 1974. That year, a linguist and adventurer named Charles Berlitz published a book simply titled "The Bermuda Triangle." It sold 20 million copies in 30 languages. It linked the disappearances to Atlantis, to extraterrestrial intelligence, to distortions in the fabric of space-time. It became one of the best-selling non-fiction books of the 20th century, and almost none of it was accurate. The rebuttal came 1 year later. In 1975, a reference librarian at Arizona State University, a licensed pilot named Larry Cush, published "The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved." He had done what no previous author had bothered to do. He went back to the primary sources. Coast Guard records, weather reports, Lloyd's of London shipping archives, newspaper accounts from the dates of each disappearance, flight logs, maritime inquiry transcripts. He investigated every major incident attributed to the triangle, one by one, case by case. What he found was not a mystery, it was a mythology. Storms that had been present during disappearances were routinely omitted from popular accounts. Ships that sank in well-documented weather were described as having vanished in calm seas. Several incidents attributed to the triangle had actually occurred hundreds of miles outside its boundaries. A few of the so-called disappearances had never happened at all. The ships in question had never existed or had been found long before the books were written. The pattern was consistent. Each retelling removed context. Each omission deepened the mystery. A compass failure in a thunderstorm became a compass failure in clear skies. A ship overloaded beyond its capacity became a ship that vanished without cause. The truth was not hidden. It was simply less interesting than the myth, and so it was quietly set aside. When the actual data was assembled, the Bermuda Triangle showed no statistically significant increase in disappearances compared to any other equally trafficked stretch of ocean. The region was busy, it was subject to violent weather, and it sat atop one of the most powerful currents on Earth. Ships and planes were lost, but they were lost for reasons. Cush's book remains the only Bermuda Triangle title continuously in print since its publication. 50 years and counting. The official positions have long since aligned with his findings. In 2010, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration stated plainly, "There is no evidence that mysterious disappearances occur with any greater frequency in the Bermuda Triangle than in any other large, well-traveled area of ocean." The United States Coast Guard does not recognize the Bermuda Triangle as a geographic area of specific hazard. Its own analysis found that 82% of incidents in the region involved operators with insufficient experience or training. Lloyd's of London, the world's oldest and most comprehensive maritime insurance market, does not charge higher premiums for vessels transiting the triangle. And in 2013, a study by the World Wildlife Fund using Lloyd's List intelligence data covering 12 years of global shipping losses ranked the Bermuda Triangle 22nd out of 35 ocean regions in vessel loss density. 21st, more dangerous places on Earth's oceans. The triangle did not even make the top 20. And yet, the legend persists. Not because the evidence supports it, but because the ocean itself provides just enough genuine strangeness to keep the story alive. The Bermuda Triangle sits squarely in what meteorologists call Hurricane Alley, the warm corridor of the Western Atlantic through which the majority of tropical storms and hurricanes pass each year. Since 1850, more than 130 tropical storms have tracked within 100 miles of Bermuda. 12 have made direct landfall. Hurricane Fabian in 2003 struck Bermuda as a Category 3 storm, with gusts reaching 164 miles per hour. It caused $300 million in damage to an island just 21 square miles in area. The Spanish treasure fleets of the 16th and 17th centuries learned this lesson at catastrophic cost. In 1715, an entire fleet of 11 ships laden with gold, silver, and Chinese porcelain from Havana was destroyed by a hurricane in the Florida Straits. More than 1,000 men drowned. Millions of pesos in treasure scattered across the shallow reefs. And in 1733, another convoy of 22 ships met the same fate in the same waters, driven onto the Keys by a storm that arrived faster than any lookout could warn. But hurricanes, at least, arrive with warning. The Triangle harbors weather that does not. The Florida Keys are the most active waterspout zone on Earth. Between 400 and 500 waterspouts form in the region every year. Between 2006 and 2024, the National Weather Service office in Key West documented more than 1,400, with average wind speeds of 31 miles per hour and peak gusts reaching 190. On a single day in March of 2017, 14 waterspouts were observed in the Florida Straits within a span of 77 minutes. White squalls, sudden, violent downbursts with no visible cloud warning can strike without any change in the sky. Microbursts generate winds exceeding 100 miles per hour at sea level. South Florida alone experiences 80 to 100 thunderstorm days per year, and the Gulf Stream itself creates conditions found almost nowhere else. The temperature difference between its warm surface waters and the cooler surrounding air generates rapid, localized storm cells that can form, intensify, and dissipate within minutes, faster than any forecast model can track. Over the decades, scientists have proposed a catalog of natural explanations for the Triangle's losses. Each has merit. None explains everything. Together, they describe a region where ordinary forces converge in extraordinary density. Methane hydrates, frozen deposits of natural gas locked in the sediment of the continental shelf, were once considered a leading candidate. The theory held that a sudden release of methane from the seafloor could reduce water density so dramatically that a ship would lose buoyancy and sink without warning. Laboratory experiments confirmed the physics. A sudden gas eruption could, in theory, swallow a vessel in seconds. But the evidence does not support the theory here. The largest known methane hydrate deposits in the Western Atlantic lie along the Blake Ridge, north of the Triangle, not within it. The United States Geological Survey has found no evidence of large-scale methane releases in the Bermuda Triangle region for at least 15,000 years. One researcher summarized the conclusions simply: the likelihood is so remote that it cannot explain the disappearances. Rogue waves offered another possibility. Dr. Simon Boxall of the University of Southampton demonstrated that when ocean currents collide, as they do where the Gulf Stream meets colder countercurrents, standing waves of 30 meters or more can form without warning. Such a wave could deliver 140 pounds per square inch of force to a ship's hull, far exceeding the 21 pounds per square inch most vessels are designed to withstand. But Boxall himself estimated that rogue waves could account for no more than 2% of incidents attributed to the triangle. Compass anomalies, perhaps the oldest and most persistent explanation, are rooted in a genuine phenomenon. The agonic line, where magnetic north and true north align perfectly, once passed through the Bermuda Triangle. In regions near the agonic line, compass needles can behave unpredictably for navigators unfamiliar with magnetic declination. But the agonic line has since shifted westward. It no longer crosses the triangle, and the United States Navy, after decades of magnetic survey work, has found no significant magnetic disturbances in the region. In 2016, a segment on the Science Channel suggested that hexagonal cloud formations, visible in satellite imagery, might generate powerful microbursts capable of sinking ships. Imagery was real, captured by NASA, but the meteorologist whose research was cited, Dr. Randy Cerveny, later distanced himself from the interpretation. Hexagonal cloud patterns, he noted, are common across mid-latitude ocean areas. They are not unique to the triangle. The truth, it seems, is less dramatic than any single theory, and more dangerous than all of them combined. Not every explanation comes from institutions. Some come from eyewitnesses. The Bermuda Triangle sits at a convergence of natural hazards that individually are well understood and collectively are lethal. The strongest current in the Atlantic, one of the busiest shipping and aviation corridors in the world, a hurricane highway, a waterspout factory, sudden squalls, shallow banks adjacent to abyssal depths, and warm waters that breed storms faster than any technology can track. Ships sink here for the same reasons ships sink everywhere: weather, mechanical failure, overloading, human error. The difference is that when something goes wrong in the Gulf Stream, the evidence disappears. The current carries it away. The depth swallows it. And absence, in the human imagination, becomes mystery. Bermuda itself, the northernmost vertex of the triangle, the island whose name the legend bears, is one of the most remarkable places in the Atlantic. It is not one island, but an archipelago of between 138 and 181 islands, islets, and rocks, depending on what one counts at high tide. Together, they cover just 54 square kilometers of dry land, smaller than Manhattan. Yet this tiny landmass sits atop a geological structure of staggering scale. Bermuda is the exposed peak of a volcanic seamount that began forming on the Atlantic seafloor more than 30 million years ago. The volcano itself has been extinct for ages. What remains is a platform of limestone and coral, built up over millennia by living organisms on the bones of ancient fire. Bermuda hosts the northernmost coral reef system in the Atlantic Ocean, 440 square kilometers of living reef surrounding the island platform. It should not exist this far north. Coral reefs require warm water, and Bermuda sits at 32 degrees latitude, well beyond the typical range. The Gulf Stream makes it possible. Its warm current bathes the island year-round, maintaining water temperatures high enough to sustain coral growth hundreds of miles from the nearest tropical zone. More than 4,500 species of marine life has been documented in Bermuda's waters. The reef system is one of the most studied in the world and one of the most improbable. Bermuda is also known by another name, the shipwreck capital of the Atlantic. More than 300 documented wrecks lie on the reefs and shoals surrounding the island. Some estimates place the true number closer to 1,000. They span 4 centuries, from 16th century Spanish galleons to 20th century steamers, their hulls encrusted with coral, their timber slowly becoming reef. Today, the wrecks are among the most visited dive sites in the Western Atlantic. Scuba divers descend through water so clear that the ships are visible from the surface, their iron ribs draped in sea fans, their holds colonized by parrotfish and grouper, their decks carpeted in soft coral. The Bermuda Underwater Exploration Institute maintains an exhibit called Bermuda Triangle, Unlock the Secrets, an entire wing devoted to the myth that bears the island's name. The exhibit does not traffic in conspiracy, it presents the science, the weather patterns, the currents, the documented explanations. Bermuda leverages the legend even as it debunks it, drawing visitors to an island that has no reason to fear its own waters, because it has lived on them for 4 centuries. The population is small, 64,636, on an island just 21 square miles in area. Per capita income approaches $145,000, among the highest in the world. In 2017, Bermuda hosted the 35th America's Cup, the oldest trophy in international sport, on the same waters where the Sea Venture went down more than 4 centuries ago. The most consequential of these wrecks occurred on July 28, 1609, when the English vessel Sea Venture, flagship of a fleet bound for the colony at Jamestown, Virginia, struck a reef during a hurricane and ran aground. The crew and passengers survived, all 150 of them. They spent 10 months on the uninhabited island, building 2 new ships from Bermuda cedar and the wreckage of the Sea Venture. And in those 10 months, they found something unexpected, a place of extraordinary natural abundance. Wild hogs left by earlier Spanish explorers, vast colonies of seabirds, sea turtles so numerous they could be gathered by hand. Bermuda was colonized not by design, but by shipwreck, and the account of that wreck, published in London as A Discovery of the Bermudas, is widely believed to have inspired William Shakespeare's final play, The Tempest. At the triangle's western vertex sits Miami, a city that has turned the ocean into an industry. Port Miami calls itself the cruise capital of the world. In fiscal year 2025, it recorded more than 8.5 million cruise passenger movements, a record. On a single day in November of 2025, 10 cruise ships were docked simultaneously, carrying more than 75,000 passengers. The port generates $61 billion annually for the local economy. It is one of the busiest maritime hubs on Earth, and it sits precisely at the entrance to the most storied stretch of water in the modern world. Just 30 miles north, in Fort Lauderdale, stands the airfield from which Flight 19 departed on that December afternoon in 1945. The base is still there, still operational, still sending aircraft east over the same waters. At the triangle's southeastern vertex stands San Juan, Puerto Rico, one of the oldest European settlements in the Americas. Founded in 1521 by Juan Ponce de Leon, San Juan is the second oldest European-established capital city in the New World. Its harbor is guarded by two fortresses that have watched over these waters for nearly 5 centuries. El Morro, begun in 1540, 49 years in the building, rises from a headland at the entrance to San Juan Bay. Its walls are 18 feet thick. 6 levels of cannon batteries face the sea. For more than 3 centuries, it defended the harbor against Dutch, English, and pirate fleets. San Cristobal, on the eastern approach, is the largest Spanish fortification ever built in the New World. Together, the two forts were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983. Today, roughly 600 cruise ships call at San Juan each year, carrying nearly 2 million passengers through waters where Spanish galleons once sailed, laden with the wealth of empire. And just offshore, close enough that the deep blue of the trench is visible from the fortress walls, the seafloor drops into the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest water in the Atlantic, lying within sight of one of the oldest cities in the Americas. The 1970s made the Bermuda Triangle a household name, not through science, but through spectacle. In 1975, a television film called Satan's Triangle aired on ABC. Airport 77 trapped passengers in a submerged airliner on the ocean floor. An Italian-Mexican production called The Bermuda Triangle recreated the disappearances with lurid special effects. Steven Spielberg placed Flight 19 at the center of the most famous alien encounter film ever made. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, released in 1977, opened with the 5 missing Avengers emerging from a cloud of light in the Sonoran Desert. Their pilots unchanged, unaged, bewildered, as if no time had passed at all. The television series Wonder Woman placed its Paradise Island inside the triangle. Leonard Nimoy devoted an episode of In Search Of to the mystery. Board games, comic books, and pop songs followed. For a brief, strange period in American culture, the Bermuda Triangle was as famous as the moon landing. PBS offered a counterpoint. In 1976, the science program Nova aired an investigation that concluded, when we go back to the original sources, the mystery evaporates. But evaporation was not what audiences wanted. The myth had taken root in something deeper than evidence. Below the myths and the theories and the cultural spectacle, the triangle holds something that requires no legend to be extraordinary: life. In the abyssal darkness of the Puerto Rico Trench, where no sunlight reaches, where water pressure exceeds 800 atmospheres, where temperatures hover just above freezing, life persists. In 2018, the Five Deeps expedition, led by explorer Victor Vescovo, descended to the bottom of the Milwaukee Deep in a submersible rated for full ocean depth. It was the first precisely measured visit to to the deepest point in the Atlantic. What they found was not emptiness. The trench floor held amphipods, small, shrimp-like crustaceans that have adapted to pressures that would crush a nuclear submarine. At least 4 species collected during the dive were likely new to science, never described, never named, never known to exist. 35 hadal species have now been documented across the Puerto Rico Trench. In 2015, a team from NOAA's Oceanos Explorer captured high-definition video of a translucent organism drifting in the trench's mid-waters, a ctenophore, a type of comb jelly with 2 long tentacles trailing behind it like threads of glass. They named it Duobrachium sparksei. It became the first new species in history to be formally identified solely from video footage. No specimen was collected, no physical sample was taken. The creature was known only because a camera happened to be pointing in the right direction at the right depth at the right moment. And in the waters between the surface and the trench floor, the triangle glows. Bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms, is one of the most widespread and least understood phenomena in the ocean. 80 to 90% of all deep-sea animals are estimated to possess it. The light serves different purposes depending on the species: defense, communication, predation, mating. Some creatures use it to blind predators, others use it to lure prey. Some flash in coordinated patterns that scientists still cannot fully decode. In the Bermuda Triangle, bioluminescence takes forms both common and strange. The Bermuda fireworms, Odontocylus enopla, rise to the surface exactly 56 hours after each full moon. The timing is precise, not roughly 56 hours. Not approximately, exactly. The females emit a brilliant green glow as they spiral upward, releasing eggs into the water. The males flash in response, swimming toward the light to release sperm. The entire display lasts less than 30 minutes. Then the worms descend, and the surface returns to darkness. The performance has been observed for centuries. It has never been altered by weather, season, or human interference. The worms do not deviate. The moon rises, the hours pass, and the ocean lights up on schedule, as it has for longer than anyone can measure. This is almost certainly what Columbus saw on the night of October 11th, 1492. The little wax candle, rising and falling. 5 centuries before anyone understood what it was, the ocean was performing the same ritual it performs still. Off the coast of Puerto Rico, Mosquito Bay holds one of the highest concentrations of bioluminescent dinoflagellates on Earth. Every disturbance of the water, a fish, a paddle, a hand, triggers a cascade of blue-green light. The organisms responsible are so numerous that the bay glows with every wave. Combined with the 3 shallow water reef systems that bracket the triangle, Bermuda's 440 square kilometer reef, the Andros Barrier Reef in the Bahamas, stretching 200 kilometers as the 3rd largest in the world, and the Florida Reef Tract running 358 miles along the Keys as the largest reef system in the continental United States. The Bermuda Triangle contains more coral diversity than almost any comparably sized region in the Atlantic. And through its waters, every spring, the North Atlantic humpback whales migrate. Between 786 and 1,434 individuals pass through Bermuda's waters each year, arriving in mid-February and lingering into April. They gather at Challenger Bank, a submerged seamount southwest of the island, where the ocean floor rises close enough to the surface that the deep blue lightens to a paler shade. Here, the whales rest, socialize, and sing. The males produce some of the longest and most complex vocalizations in the animal kingdom. Songs that can last for hours, that change each season, and that carry through the water for miles in every direction. They have made this crossing for longer than any human record. The route predates the triangle. It predates the myth. It predates the name. And yet, the whales return, year after year, generation after generation, guided by a knowledge encoded not in charts or compasses, but in something older, something the ocean itself seems to remember. In 2020, researchers positively identified a shipwreck lying in 65 feet of water off the coast of St. Augustine, Florida. It was the SS Cotopaxi, a tramp steamer that had departed Charleston, South Carolina in November of 1925 with 32 crew members aboard and vanished. For nearly a century, the Cotopaxi had been listed among the Bermuda Triangle's unsolved disappearances. It appeared in books, documentaries, and films, including Spielberg's Close Encounters, where it emerged from the desert alongside the Flight 19 Avengers. The wreck told a different story. The Cotopaxi had sunk in a storm. Its position was consistent with the weather conditions recorded on the date of its loss. It lay outside the commonly drawn boundaries of the triangle. It had been sitting on the seafloor, undiscovered but not unexplained, for 95 years. The ocean does not distinguish between legends. It holds what it holds, without preference and without narrative. The modern era has stripped the triangle of much of its power to generate new mysteries. GPS satellites track vessels to within meters. ADS-B transponders broadcast the position of every commercial aircraft in real time. Satellite communications reach the most remote stretches of open ocean. Automatic identification systems allow coast guards to monitor thousands of ships simultaneously. Emergency position indicating radio beacons activate on contact with water, broadcasting distress signals that can be detected from orbit. In the age of Flight 19, a plane could be lost because its compasses failed and its radio faded. Today, that same failure would trigger an automatic cascade of alerts visible on screens from Miami to London. Unexplained disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle have been reduced in recent decades to effectively zero. The water is the same, the weather is the same, the Gulf Stream still runs. But the tools have changed. And with better tools, the mystery dissolves, not into the supernatural, but into the ordinary machinery of a dangerous sea. As of 2022, the global initiative known as Seabed 2030 reported that only 23.4% of the world's ocean floor has been mapped at meaningful resolution. In 2017, that figure was 6%. The Atlantic, one of the most sailed, most studied, most storied oceans on Earth, remains in most of its depth unmapped, unknown, unseen. The Bermuda Triangle sits within this darkness. 500,000 square miles of water above a seafloor that in large part no human eye and no instrument has ever surveyed. This is what persists beneath the myth. Not aliens, not Atlantis, not a portal in the fabric of time. Something far stranger, something far more real. An ocean trench deeper than mountains at all, where eyeless creatures carry fragments of sunlit weed into permanent darkness. A sea without shores, where eels born in European rivers complete journeys of 10,000 kilometers to spawn and die. A coral reef the size of a small country, growing in silence beneath the Gulf Stream for thousands of years, unknown to the civilization that sailed above it. A volcanic island where a bird declared extinct for 330 years still nests on rocks too small to name. A current that moves 30 million cubic meters of water every second, erasing every trace of what it takes. A region where the seafloor drops from wading depth to crushing depth within a single mile. The Bermuda Triangle does not need a myth to be extraordinary. It never did. What it needs, what it has always needed, is to be seen. Not as a headline, not as a theory, not as a story told around a campfire or sold in an airport bookshop, but as a place. A real, physical, measurable stretch of earth where stone and water and life converge at extremes found almost nowhere else. For more than 500 years, ships have crossed these waters. For more than 70 years, the Triangle has been a name. And in all that time, the ocean beneath it has kept its own counsel, indifferent to legends, patient beyond any human reckoning, vast in ways that human maps have only begun to trace. The stories we tell about the Bermuda Triangle say more about us than about the sea. We fear what we cannot explain. We fill silence with narrative. We turn absence into myth, because the alternative, that the ocean is simply larger than our understanding, deeper than our instruments, older than our memory, is harder to hold in the mind. Every generation has added its own layer to the legend. The sailors of the 16th century feared sea monsters. The aviators of the 20th century feared magnetic vortexes. The readers of the 1970s feared alien abduction. Each fear reflected the anxieties of its time. The ocean remained unchanged. But the ocean does not ask to be understood. It asks only to be crossed. And those who have crossed it, the Spanish galleons, Tudor airliners, the 5 Avengers of Flight 19, the torpedo-men and navigators, and young men who did not come home. They are not characters in a legend. They are part of the sea now, carried by the same current that has moved through these waters for millennia, resting on the same seafloor that builds coral in darkness, feeds eels for their final journey, and holds the bones of ships from every century since Columbus. The Triangle does not take, the ocean receives, and what it receives, it keeps. The most feared place in the ocean is also one of the most alive, one of the most ancient, one of the most unknown. 76% of its floor remains unmapped. Every expedition returns with species never seen before. Every sonar pass reveals features never recorded. The Gulf Stream still runs. The Sargasso still drifts. The Cahao still calls through the Bermuda dark. 5 centuries of crossing, 70 years of legend, and still, the ocean holds more than we have found. It always has. Thank you for watching. If journeys like this one speak to you, into the places the world thinks it knows, but has never truly seen, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. There is always another horizon, another depth, another name on the map that holds more than any headline has ever told. Until the next journey.